Thanks for checking out the Brad and John Show podcast. This segment of the show is brought to you by John Combest's book, Stalking, Harassment, Internet Trolling, A Guide to Recovering and Rebuilding After Online Attacks. It's a great reference if you've ever been the unfortunate target of a social media attack. It's available on Amazon. Just search John Combest. That's C-O-M-B-E-S-T, John Combest, and the book will show up in your search results. Now it's time for another segment of the Brad and John Show. Can you handle it?
I'm Egbert, the owner of this station. Check out my website at egbert.com. That's E-G-G-B-U-R-T, egbert.com. Now it's back to Brad and John. Check out their website at bjshow.co. The BJ Show? Come on, guys. Anyway, here's B and J.
I was just perusing the johncombest.com site, and I did not see anything on there about Kurt Schaefer being on 97.1 yesterday with Mark Reardon.
Oh, wow, he was. I know, I missed that. That's awesome.
Okay, he was on there, and he made a shot at Dr. Bob Onder. And essentially his shot was, he's the only guy that lives in CD3, or at least one of the main candidates. Aren't there a bunch of other candidates as well, too? Isn't Arnie Denhoff running for that as well, too?
Oh, yeah. I think there's like 8 people that have filed for it, Brad.
Okay, so the two main dudes right now are Bob Onder and Kurt Schaefer.
And remember, there's a guy named Justin Hicks who's out there, Brad, who is currently a state representative who also says that he's running.
Does he have a chance?
No, absolutely not.
Okay.
And he's, according to the Post-Dispatch, he's taken in $45,000 and spent $3,000. And he has about $42,000 on. Now, he may indeed stay on the ballot. We've talked about him before, Brad. I feel like this is, as somebody who doesn't know him at all, I feel like this could be his exit from the political world. He could run for Congress, and then, in a year he could be out of politics and be leading a very happy, successful life away from political nonsense, Brad.
Is he termed out as a state rep?
No, not at all. I think he's a freshman.
But he's not going to run again, or is he keeping?
This is the gentleman, Brad, that was at the center of a controversy involving when he was, I believe it was 19. He allegedly got in a dispute with his girlfriend. We've talked about this a few times on the show. He has looked to seal some of the police records about an alleged restraining or about a restraining order, and he's now running for Congress. And the gentleman who made these old documents public is running for his seat now. So Justin Hicks has given up his state rep seat and says he's running for Congress. And, this could be his exit from the political world. I assume that he doesn't enjoy having his personal life, in the pages of the Post-Dispatch. So this could be his exit, Brad. You get what I'm saying?
Well, I can identify with that because of the fact that I have a very similar situation that happened to me when I was younger. I still have a restraining order. Did I ever tell you the story?
No, against Sophia Loren?
No, Raquel Welch. I still have a restraining order against.
You were seeing both of them, Brad, and you know how they get.
Right, and Raquel didn't like the fact that I was seeing Sophia, so she literally came over and slashed my tires one night. And the interesting thing was that she came over in a cab, and the cab driver was a friend of mine, so he testified to the whole thing, and we had it, we had the record sealed, and she's trying to get them unsealed because of the fact that she's trying to essentially make me look bad and trying to, make me. Matter of fact, I've heard the rumor that she's being paid by Tracy Ellis to have the records unsealed.
Hey, there we go. Number 4 of the week, Brad. Number 4. I was surprised that can we talk about Josh Hawley campaign staffer decision in 2018, Brad? We haven't touched on that yet today. Hey, welcome to the BG Show. We carry all of Brad's grudges. We're still mad about stuff that happened 6 years ago. All right.
I'm not mad. It's just that when somebody tells you something, when you're told, oh, yeah, we're going to advertise with you, and then they never do, it's one of those things. It's like.
Brad, listen, I went to Fuzzy Taco in 2016. And the waitress said that she was going to bring me an extra set of napkins, and she never did. So every time friends are like, hey, I want to go to Fuzzy Taco. I'm meeting a friend of mine for lunch today, Brad. You know what? If he wants to go to Fuzzy Taco, I'm saying, nope, Why, John? Because in 2016, one of the waitresses said that she was going to bring me a stack of napkins and she never did. Can you believe how disrespectful that is? And then Claire McCaskill was sitting at another table and they brought Claire McCaskill napkins, but they didn't give them to me.
Well, nothing against your choice of eateries, but there's one place I would never go, and that is Fuzzy Taco, because first off, I don't like Mexican food. And second off, talking about naming a restaurant to somewhat discourage you from going there. You know what I mean? To me, when you say Fuzzy Taco, it reeks of the fuzz being questionable, if you know what I'm saying.
No. When I hear Fuzzy Taco, I think delightful things, Brad.
Oh, man.
I would even go in the front, and then you know me, like I'll probably sneak around the back real quick, just play around, and then come back to the front of the restaurant.
Okay, so in other words, if I said I eat my favorite place to eat hamburgers, is it Harry Hamburger? That would be a good place as well, too?
No, because I'm not into beef, Brad.
Okay.
Like I'll eat a taco 7 days a week, but I'm not touching some guy's meat. You know what I'm saying?
Let's move along.
Where were we, Brad? What were we talking about?
Kurt Schaefer.
Yeah, okay, so he was on 97.1.
Right, and he made
he on? Oh, and on Reardon Show, okay.
Yeah, he was on Reardon Show afternoon, and apparently him and Reardon go back. They're buds from the old days when Mark went to school at Mizzou and then worked at, I believe, at KFRU. He was did a talk show and news director or something like that back in the day in Como, and they're all old buds. Now, how old is Kurt Schaefer? Is he Mark Reardon would be I think Mark Reardon's pushing 60. I think he's 58 or 59.
Yeah, I would guess Schaefer's probably in his mid-50s.
Oh, okay. So they knew each other from probably way back when.
Yeah.
Okay, and you say, and you like Kurt Schaefer, you think he's going to do it against Bob Onder?
No. No, the no there is not that I don't like him, because I think I've met him a few times. I think he's fine. I think that it'll be really close, Brad. I think that Schaefer has a geographic advantage from being in that mid-Missouri area. I think there's a lot of people in what you would consider the Republican establishment who really want to keep that seat with a mid-Missouri guy.
Right.
Dwayne Luetkemeyer was a mid-Missouri guy. They want Kurt Schaefer to be a mid-Missouri guy. And you know how parochial politics can be. If you just want somebody from your region to do it. The thing is, though, Brad, you're not going to outflank Bob Onder on the right. And with Donald Trump at the top of the ticket, Bob Onder's going to have plenty of money. Now, Kurt Schaefer's also going to have plenty of money, but Bob Onder's going to have plenty of money. And when you're talking about being close to Donald Trump and where Donald Trump is ideologically, I think it's going to be hard to beat Bob Onder in that race.
Interesting. Well, it's sort of like what we talked about yesterday when we had Bill Eigel on. Bill Eigel is in a three-way race for the governor, and the unfortunate situation he's in is that he's up against two guys that have statewide name recognition. Obviously, Jay Ashcroft has the most name recognition from the fact that his father was John Ashcroft, and he's a state office holder right now. Similar situation with Mike Kehoe. Mike Kehoe has name recognition from that mid-Missouri area because of his car dealerships that he had for a long time.
That's right.
I think, aren't they still named Mike Kehoe, or are they still?
No, I think they have a different name. I think they've had a different name for a while.
He sold.
But real quick, back to the Kurt Schaefer thing, Brad. I think we should also consider too that in that Columbia area and in that market, it's a little bit different breed of Republicans, and that they've elected a Caleb Rowden for 8 years. Twice they've elected, well, more than that when you consider that Caleb Rowden was a state rep. So there's an idea that maybe mid-Missouri Republicans might be a little bit more moderate, so to speak. But again, it's going to be hard to beat a Trump guy when Trump is at the top of the ticket. And if you're Kurt Schaefer, you do that dance of saying, I want the conservative/right-wing vote, but I also want to be the, quote, adult in the room, unquote. And man, that's a hard dance to do, Brad.
It's hard for him to pull off, or hard?
Yeah, well, no, I think it's hard for anybody to do because you need support from rock-ribbed conservatives, but then you also want to do the Blaine Luetkemeyer thing and say, look, I'm not a nutbag like Marjorie Taylor Greene. I'm not a nutbag like Matt Gaetz. I'm just a good mainline conservative. Trust me to vote like an Ann Wagner. Trust me to vote like a good mainline conservative, and I'm not going to go do wacky right-wing stuff.
Okay, here we go again, though. And you just stumbled into an area that I find fascinating. Okay, you mentioned the Matt Gaetz and the Marjorie Taylor Greene. Who's the other one you mentioned? You mentioned a third. wackadoodle Republican.
Those are the two ones that are considered the fringe of the Republican Party.
Okay, but then you look at the other side of the aisle, and you've got AOC, and you've got weirdos like that, but yet they stick together and vote as a block, whereas the Republicans don't. This is the crazy thing with this, is the Republicans are constantly blowing up each other, whereas the Democrats can do weird stuff. They can have AOC say all sorts of crazy things, like saying when she's interviewing, what's the guy's name, Toady Bobulinski, and do you remember this thing where he was making testimony last month, and she asked him, what crimes did the Bidens commit, and he said RICO. Remember this story?
I don't remember his name. No, I remember seeing clips of this.
Okay, Toady Bobulinski is the guy, which is interesting, talking about being the kind of guy that the Democrats don't want to know exists, because he was like one of Hunter Biden's partners. And he knows the intimate details behind their businesses and stuff like that. Matter of fact,
that's right.
And Tony has this impeccable pedigree that he's like a well-respected, Army officer. He might even be like a Green Beret or something like that. Anyway, and is a very respected guy in the finance community and the whole bit. So much respected that he decided he didn't want anything to do anymore with Hunter Biden and all the escapades there. So AOC is grilling him. And she's going, what exactly did they do? Name me the law they violated. And he goes into this long list, and he says RICO statutes, or he just says RICO, and she says, RICO's not a law, it's a category. Well, first off, she's wrong, because if you know what RICO is all about?
Yeah, RICO is a law, right?
RICO is a law, and RICO was put into effect to essentially get the gangsters.
Yeah, it was a mafia thing, right?
Right. Essentially what they were doing was they couldn't prove. It's just like the old Al Capone thing. They couldn't nail him for all the murders and all the robberies and stuff like that, but they could nail him on income tax violations, And the RICO thing essentially was, what does it stand for?
It's racketeering as part of it.
Right.
And like corruption. Right. Something like corrupt organization, something like that.
So go back to my point that we got the wackadoodles on the Democratic side, and they vote as a block. We got the wackadoodles on the Republican side, but they don't vote as a block.
But let me interrupt, Brad. Here's where I think the difference is. If Democrats had a majority by 2, 3, 4 votes, we would see the same thing on the left. We would see AOC and the bald one that looks like a black Mr. Clean, the one I'm talking about.
I do
Presley, whatever her name is.
Oh yeah.
The black Telly Savalas.
Mr.
We would
Clean.
have a handful of them acting out against whoever the Democrat leader was, because the Dem majority would be so thin that a handful of Democrats would matter. Now, because the Republican majority is so thin, a handful of Republicans matter a lot, which is why they're able to get more headlines, Brad.
Okay, moving on to something else. Okay. Mark Reardon also said something interesting yesterday, that he said for several years he has been using the Twin Spires app to bet on the Kentucky Derby. Are you familiar with the Twin Spires app?
I am not. No, who owns it? Do you know?
Well, I believe it's owned by the actual racetrack. I think it's because if I'm not mistaken, Twin Spires, there are 2 big spires at the Kentucky Derby. I believe that's the whole deal. And I believe it's owned by the racetrack. Okay. And he said that he has the Twin Spires app on his phone, and he's a big Kentucky Derby dude. And he talked about for several years he's been able to bet in Missouri on the Twin Spires app. And he said he was on there just the other day, and he got locked out. Now, and he's saying, why don't we have gambling in Missouri? Where does that stand right now? Can you give us an update on that?
It's timely, Brad. And I sent you a reel last night from Jason Rosenbaum.
Right. And that's part of the reason
I got. Link up to it today on my website. You could see Jason Rosenbaum did a teaser reel. On Friday's show, he's going to do a deep dive into sports betting in Missouri, the status of it, where it stands, etc. He's suggesting people send in questions. In general, Brad, as it stands today, the sports groups are collecting signatures, and I forgot their name. I've lost the name of the group in my head, but it's, I believe, Kids Win Education. It's something like that, and it's about legalizing sports betting. And because of, and this has been a recurrent theme in Missouri, because the legislature fails to act, people go to an initiative petition process to get a law passed. In this case, Brad, it's the sports teams and the betting groups who are actually writing the legislation. So as you and I have referenced before, as it relates to marijuana, when you have an industry writing its own laws, people might not like what they get, rather than having a legislature go in there and make the laws themselves. So it's pretty silly how long this has been delayed. And there's been the controversy, as Jason alludes to in his reel. There are folks who say, hey, if we have rules about sports betting, let's also make some rules about these video lottery terminals that you see at gas stations.
Right, right.
So I would suggest folks watch the Rosenbaum reel and then listen to what he has to say on Friday.
Very creative, by the way. Thanks for sending that along. Okay, which leads me to my next point. As far as that's concerned, where do we stand on the initiative petition thing?
It looks like – so this is a hot topic, Brad, and it's debatable whether or not the legislature will pass initiative petition changes this session or not. And, of course, Democrats say that it violates the idea of one person, one vote, the idea that a simple majority would not be enough to get – or that you would have to get a majority of votes in each congressional district, depending on how the law is written. So, on Scott Fawn's show, let's reference his show again. On Sunday, they asked the panel, Scott asked the panel, do you think this will pass? And the opinions are split whether or not Republicans will pass this legislation, Brad. Okay,
and once again, explain to me why this is so hard to do, because the Republicans face the fate that could happen in Ohio, where the abortion thing could be blown wide open by an initiative petition, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. And I think that here's the thing, is that as I understand it, the backers of this, first of all, are split on whether or not Missourians would actually vote to make it harder for voters to amend the Constitution. And I have to say, Brad, I think conventional wisdom is Missouri voters will not vote to make it harder for themselves to change the Constitution. I think that's conventional wisdom. And what you're talking about, Brad, is that it appears as every week that goes on that the abortion initiative petition will most likely appear on the November ballot rather than the August ballot. Now, as a partisan Republican, if I was working for the Missouri Republican Party, I would definitely want that on an August ballot, because if it's in the primary, it's one thing. But if it's in the general election and we have a handful of close elections in Missouri, not statewide, but in individual legislative districts, I don't want as many Democrats as possible coming out. And you could presume that an abortion measure in November will drive some residual, or I should say ancillary, Democrat turnout. And
the theory being that not that many Democrats are going to show up in August, because most of the ballots, most of the people are going to be concerned with Republican issues, Republican candidates on the primary ballot, correct?
That's correct. That's correct.
Okay. See, I'm learning from you, John.
Oh, well, hey, we learn from each other, Brad. I learn a lot from you.
You poor guy, you. Okay, we have to take a break.
Thanks for checking out the Brad and John Show podcast. This segment of the show is brought to you by John Combest's book, Stalking, Harassment, Internet Trolling, A Guide to Recovering and Rebuilding After Online Attacks. It's a great reference if you've ever been the unfortunate target of a social media attack. It's available on Amazon. Just search John Combest. That's Combest, John Combest, and the book will show up in your search results. Now it's time for another segment of the Brad and John Show. Can you handle it?